More about American sports next with NBA Hall of Famer Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, NFL Hall of Famer Michael Irvin, and others talking about sports and race. The panel was hosted by the U.S. Conference of Mayors. It's just over an hour.
All right, thanks, Matthew. All right, mayors, I hope you guys are situated and seated. We're going to have a really dynamic panel here. I know a lot of you had a good time over the weekend, and we're looking forward to it. You stayed on Monday. For one, we had business to conduct, and then two, it was this really impressive panel. So let me give a little background as I kind of bring up each of our panelists. And before we do that, I'm going to have Mayor Ballard come up with it in a moment. From Jackie Robinson integrating baseball to Tommy Smith and John Carlos saluting human rights in the 1968 Olympics medal ceremony, sports have time and time again played a pivotal role in advancing civil rights. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver's swift and decisive response to LA Clippers owner Donald Sterling's racial charged comments makes clear that in today's society, institutionalized racism is not welcome. In light of both events and the long-standing battle against discrimination and institutional racism in professional sports, we are taking the necessary action today to discuss the social and political implications of racism in sports. Through this interactive conversation, panelists will tackle questions that can tell us why racism still pervades our sports as well as our society. More importantly, we are convening today to learn and to discuss how sports should serve our communities and how we together can become agents of change in our cities with our sports teams. Before we move on to our panel, I would like to introduce a leader in addressing the intersection between sports and cities. Indianapolis Mayor Greg Ballard is chair of our Mayor's Professional Sports Alliance. The mission of this alliance is to share among mayors information, resources, and support on issues related to professional sports and to work effectively with leagues, players, and owners. Let's give a round of applause for Mayor Ballard.
Good morning. Good morning. Mr. President, distinguished guests. Sports bring people together. They bring communities together, certainly during a deep playoff run when athletes do good work in the community. Sports bring nations together. How many of us gasped at Portugal's last-second goal last night? But sports can also divide us, and there can be a meanness and ugliness, as is the case in this Clippers episode. I was proud that the Mayor's Professional Sports Alliance stood with our president, Kevin Johnson, as he worked with the players and the alumni as they addressed this situation. And I do applaud the NBA for taking swift and decisive action. But ultimately, sports organizations are part of who we are. They represent us as a community. And despite the elite athleticism that we all witness, we really want them to embody our character and our compassion as a community. And that includes the respect for all of our citizens. To me, diversity has always been about respect. And respect was lacking in the Clippers organization. Sports mirror our society insofar that inclusion, that respect, has come at such a great price, such as the life of Jackie Robinson. It is all of our responsibility to continue the march. I look forward to the panel. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mayor Ballard. All right, I'm going to introduce the panelists, and then we're going to have a serious conversation. So our first panelist, that I'd like to bring out to give a mayoral perspective on this important issue is our very own Michael Nutter. As we know, Philadelphia has a reputation of being a passionate sports town. We can hear boos all over the country for the Eagles and the Phillies and the Sixers and the Clippers if you're not from Philadelphia, especially in Sacramento. It has a long history of sports in Philadelphia as it has spurred on serious conversation about race. Former Phillies manager Ben Chapman was one of the loudest voices opposing Jackie Robinson's integration to baseball. Let's give a round of applause for our very own past president, Michael Nutter. All right, secondly, I'd like to bring, go ahead, have a seat, Mike, you good. Secondly, I'd like to bring out a person who was originally scheduled to moderate it, and I thought he would probably give more and better perspective sitting on a panel, so we switched places. I didn't know I was going to lose my voice. So Roland Martin, an influential reporter, commentator, long career at BET, CNN, The Defender in Chicago, most recently TV One, has his own program called News One Now. He's from Houston. He was born in Houston in Texas, went to Texas A&M, a journalist, got his master's degree in Christian communications, has written several books. Let's give a round of applause for Roland Martin. Go ahead, Ro, you good. All right. All right. Since we're in Dallas, Mayor Rawlings, this is for you. I get a chance to introduce a Dallas Cowboy legend, and this is a surprise guest for us. We didn't put him on the schedule intentionally, so Mayor Rawlings would be surprised. This man led the Dallas Cowboys to not one or two, but 3 Super Bowl championships. He's one of 17 children from Fort Lauderdale, went to the University of Miami, won a championship there, one of the greatest wide receivers to ever play the game. Let's give a round of applause for Michael Irvin. Come on, come on. Thanks for showing up, baby. It's really proud. Thank you. Let me say hello there. I think most of you know that Michael is also now a personality and commentates on football on a regular basis, and he's got that personality that's just magnetic, and it's awesome to have him here. I don't know if you ever got a chance to see his acceptance speech in the Hall of Fame, and I know most of you have. It was one of the most amazing acceptance speeches all time. So one more round of applause for the playmaker. All right. This is the biggest introduction I'm ever going to make. I mean, is this just not exciting about who's about to come out? Y'all should clap before I even say his name. Just let him know we love him before I even say his name. All right, just listen to this. I didn't want to go long, but just listen to this for a minute. 6-time NBA championship. This man won 6 of them. 6-time most valuable player. 19-time NBA All-Star. Hall of Fame inductee. Played with the Bucks in Milwaukee, gave a little love there, won a championship, then went out west to LA and won 5 more. From New York, went to UCLA, played under John Wooden, won 3 championships in college. If you add those 2 up, that's like 9. God, dog. The man as a freshman was not allowed to play varsity sports, or he would have had a 10th. In college, he was so effective, they literally changed the rule because he was there. This is like a rule changer in a real way. He's a legend. He also, a New York Times best-selling author, have written books on history and civil rights, including Black Profiles in Courage, What Color Is in My World, host of books. A documentary has been written about and made about one of his books, Harlem Rants, two-time NAACP Image Award winner. Get on your feet and give a round of applause for the one and only, the greatest player to ever play the game, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I feel like we can all go home. I feel like we've been to church and we ain't even said a word yet. Look at him. Look at Kareem just for a second. Look at it. Dignified and distinguished. And what makes him so amazing, not only arguably the best player to ever play the game, but it wasn't just what he did on the court, it's what he did off the court. And to me, for him to be here today with these panelists is amazing. And just so you know, this is often something people don't know about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He's not an out front person. Behind the scenes, last night, he took a half a dozen mayors out to dinner. So can you give him a round of applause for treating our mayors to dinner last night as well? All right, you all ready? Okay, we're going to get it going. We're going to have this panel discussion. I'm going to stand up here because I'm losing my voice a little bit. So I want to first throw the first question out to Mayor Nutter. Mayor, what was your gut reaction when you heard the Donald Sterling tape?
I have to tell you, I was really stunned. I mean, at first, my folks told me about it, and I said, well, I mean, is this true? I mean, did somebody really say this? I mean, you know, you have all these tapes and YouTube and all that, and certainly the elected officials know about, you know, all that stuff. Then I said, well, maybe it was doctored. You know, how did somebody say all of that? So I watched it, and I knew it was like 9 or 10 minutes or so. I said, well, I'm probably not going to watch this whole thing. I just want to see the. And I mean, it's the epitome of like an accident on the. I mean, it was just fascinating. I mean, in every piece, it just went on and on and on. And at the end, I mean, I was just like disgusted. I mean, you want to dog magic, you want to, you know, talk about people, call folks out their name and all this other kind of stuff. Like, you're like an owner of a team. You're just like an adult. You're supposed to be responsible. And so, I mean, you know, I had some other thoughts, but, you know, this is a family program, so, I mean, it was insane. But, I mean, it's been found to be, you know, true, legit. And, you know, I mean, we know the end of the story, and we have to give our president certainly huge recognition for the role that he played, and the NBA and the commissioner certainly handled it properly. But it was a stunning moment, I think, in America.
Awesome. So, Kareem, question for you. Same question. You know, you wrote a very impressive Time magazine piece, which was awesome. So what was your first reaction? And they're probably going to be surprised with your comment, but go ahead, Kareem.
My first reaction was surprise because I had worked for Mr. Sterling. I coached the Clippers in the year 2000. He invited me to his daughter's wedding. I had no idea exactly what was going on. But I also, because of my association, I know Elgin Baylor. I know what he was complaining about. So I was confused, not knowing exactly which set of facts Mr. Sterling stood behind. And then when his words came out, it was so obvious and shocking and just disgusting. All of those things wrapped in one. But the surprise of it, to find that type of sentiment in someone who relies on Black Americans for so much of his success and public profile. It was amazing. I just couldn't believe it that someone could have that much bigotry inside and think that it was okay.
Michael, what was your gut reaction when you first heard it?
You know, I thought I was hurt. You know, hurt for certainly the players on the court, and for the fans. Because let's be real here, the Clippers, but they've been waiting a long time for this. Where they are right now, they've been waiting a long time, and there have been a lot of fans, a lot of loyal fans, and to have Doc Rivers, to have Chris Paul, guys that really are such upstanding African Americans that represent the best we have to offer. And then to point out and attack one of the best we have to offer in Magic Johnson. I was hurt. I was hurt for all of those other people. I won't say that I was totally shocked, because I truly believe, and I understand, we still have the remnants of some of these still left. So I'm not shocked, but I was hurtful. And we had heard some things prior to this about Donald Sterling. And the Bible says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And as we go on, and he kept going on, I think we heard more of his heart. I was shocked and hurt for all of those people.
Roland, I'm going to ask you the same question, and for everybody out there watching him do what he's doing right there, he does not have ADD. Well, he may have that too, but he's just a Twitter maniac. This man tweets like nobody's business, so I want you to know that he's paying attention. Roland?
I got him some new followers.
Go ahead.
My reaction was, and? See, folks were all surprised by it, and I think what people were more surprised by was the fact that he said it to the degree that he did. But the reason I was some way pleased with it, because we are living in absolute denial, because we have too many people who are walking around going, oh my God, we have a black president. This is a post-racial America. You actually had Eric Bolling on Fox News who said, all this stuff about racism, I don't even see it, doesn't even exist. All you have to do is go to the EEOC website, and you will see case after case after case after case of examples after President Obama was elected. And so what happens is we all of a sudden act as if, well, you know, things are changing. You see black CEOs, you see black mayors, governors, and the president. So somehow these things have been wiped out. When Dr. King said, in chaos or community, where do we go from here? It's what do we do about what is in somebody's heart? And for him to be a team owner, it's no shock. Just look, you got a city councilwoman in Lamarck, Texas, who was recorded saying, we need to get those blacks off the school board. And she refuses to apologize. She is unapologetic, saying, I said it, and we need to get those blacks off the school board. And so it causes people to go, wait a minute, we have to confront the reality of race in America. Who's here from Akron, Ohio? Anyone from Akron, Ohio?
Mayor's over here.
The Akron Beacon Journal won a Pulitzer Prize several years ago for a whole series on race and ushering a citywide conversation. And part of this is because what we love to do in America, we love to not have that brutally honest discussion. We want to have the nice, sweet, we all get along conversations without realizing there are people in power who own businesses, who are elected officials, who might be in charge of, yes, having black folks who work for them, but have a hardcore view on the issue of race. And so it caused a lot of people to force themselves to say, wait a minute, we might want to examine ourselves. And it forced the NBA to have to answer some questions as to when you had all of these examples of this owner and the issue of race over the years, you were silent about it and said nothing, including that major housing lawsuit that he had to pay the money out, and the league did nothing.
So, Kareem, I'm going to come back to you. And I think most of you know that, I mean, Kareem went to college in the 60s when civil rights were at the top of its game. And you played professional sports 60s and 70s. Tell us, are we at the end of an era, or help us connect with what you were going through then and where you think we are today?
Well, I think what has happened is when we had the fact that we had the legal means to combat racism, institutionalized racism, a lot of black Americans said, okay, now we have the tools to achieve something. But it has taken us decades to achieve those things that we had the tools to work on. And when it comes to working on what's in people's hearts and their minds with regard to the inferiority of people who do not look like them, we have a very long way to go. Even though we have these tools, we have a long way to go because a lot of people do not understand their own bigotry. It's so endemic to the human experience that too many people don't get it when they are very intensely affected by racism and do racist acts. They're not even aware of it. So we still have a very long way to go.
Mayor Johnson, position this properly. Position this properly. Emmett Till is killed August 28, 1955. The Montgomery bus boycott begins December 1st, 1955. You go to the sit-ins in 1960, the students of North Carolina A&T. You go to the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, August 28, 1963. Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, Fair Housing Act. Nixon gets elected in 68. Southern Strategy, but also affirmative action comes in. So in a period of 13 years, the country was transformed. So if you use 1968 as the marker of so-called full freedom for African Americans, that's 46 years. Right now, 45 and a half years. 1968. So you say Dr. King is killed April 4th, 1968, and you say affirmative action, Arthur Fletcher with Nixon. So this is use 68 as the marker, okay? So-called full freedom for black folks in 68. This is a 46-year period. I'm 45. We'll be 46 in November. So we walk around as if, oh my God, things have changed, and all of a sudden we have amazing freedom. But in the history of the country, African Americans, if you use 68, which we know is a false year anyway, because you had the whole issue in Boston and other cities when it came to desegregation and busing, 46 years so-called freedom. So when you expand it beyond Donald Sterling, as the comments about race, you expand it to the issue of housing and economics and inclusion. You go beyond that, you will see that, yes, we've come a long way, but we're only talking about 46 years of so-called full freedom. And so if you think that we somehow have gotten over the issue of race, we have to be delusional, because it didn't happen in 46 years. In the same way in South Africa, where we celebrated Nelson Mandela's passing, but you still have in that country where South Africans who are black still don't have access to power economically and politically. They might be president of the countries, but they don't control capital.
So, Michael, and I'm going to ask you both the same question in some respect. I think most of you remember there was a Philadelphia Eagles football player who got video recorded saying the N-word. And so what was your thought when you first heard that? And then, Michael, you're the mayor of the city where it happened.
Well, it's a couple things, and I'm going to hold on to what you talked about, 68 years and us being 45 years past that date, and I'm going to come back to that, but I'll address the Riley Cooper situation and how I addressed it, because that's my job every Sunday and Thursday to talk about the things that goes on, the things that go on in sports. You know, Riley Cooper, I've watched, and Riley's been playing football for a lot of years. One of the things I talked about when this issue came up, I was just coming from a basketball camp with my son in Las Vegas. And as we walked by the pool, they had music blasting, saying the N-word, 50 different ways to Sunday. And everybody was rocking and having a great time. And Riley Cooper steps in a club, and he steps out in an angering situation, drops the N-word. And here we go, of course, saying everything about Riley Cooper. I thought, first of all, and I said it then, and I'll say it now, first of all, we all have to take responsibilities as African Americans for injecting the word out there and making it okay. Now, Riley Cooper said it in a moment of heat. In a moment of heat. The words words already put in your spirit through all the songs you're listening to. In a moment of heat, you let the word go. Do I count him as a racist? No, and I said, I don't think so. This man had been around people for all of his life. We would have received that. Now, Richie Incognito's situation is a little bit different in Miami. because I thought that's exactly what the word was used and how it was used back in the day. Richie Incognito used the word as a systematic way to break down another man. Now that is what I call racism, a systematic way of breaking down the other man. Now that's not tolerable.
I just want y'all to know when they say athletes are not smart, look at these two up here. Look, I'm sitting next to the dictionary. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is like a dictionary. This man knows every single meaning of every word, and for him to be able to break down the issues, this is what just drives me crazy as a former athlete, because people don't give athletes enough credit for what they do and their perspectives, and I think these are just great examples. So Michael,
He knows more words than Don King?
yeah, he does.
Okay, I'm just joking.
Absolutely. Test him. Put him on the spot. We was on this is a true, honest to God true. We was on Kareem and I were on a streetcar in San Francisco, Mary Lee. We were getting some award, and we riding around. I'm just looking at him the whole time. He's like, can you quit looking? I was like, it's Kareem, man. So we riding around. So then I said, tell me something about the Great Walls of China. I was just trying to be funny. This man said, did you know The Rock was a quarry built for, I was like, what, who knows about the Great Wall of China? That's a true story. so Mayor Nutter, same topic, because you had to deal with it head on.
Yeah, I did. And my reaction was swift, aggressive, and negative. And I saw that tape. And we put out a statement that said that he needed to clean it up, he needed to fix it. And I think, quite honestly, as I saw it, I was left with the impression that it wasn't the first time in his life that he had used that word. And so that calls into question a whole host of other issues. And, you know, the team tried to deal with it. All of a sudden, he suddenly had to go away. It was never really clear where he went, but I mean, I think they're just trying to get him out of town, out of the situation. You know, Philly is not a we were teasing in the back, Michael Irvin, because he always loved playing in Philadelphia. So our fans are passionate. It's not an overreaction kind of town, but there was a lot of reaction to that. It's a player. They were home. They weren't on the field. It was off, you know. But I mean, there was a very, very negative reaction to it. And you know, I have some thoughts about how it was handled and whether it was completely handled properly. But you know, season started. There wasn't much stuff. He went on to have a pretty good season, and I'm not going to sit here and say that all is forgotten. So I think, obviously, you ask the question, people remember. He's trying to get past it. But you know, when I see him on TV or if I'm at the game, I hear his name, I immediately remember that. So he's got to deal with that.
But Mayor, we have a false reality and a false discussion about race. Here's what it has evolved into. Riley Cooper, racist, not a racist.
Right.
You watch these cable news shows, and it was the same thing with the Donald Sterling conversation and many other. It becomes racist, not a racist.
Right.
As if there is nothing in between those two.
Right.
So what happens is folks begin to say, well, no, you are a racist, and so you have all the people commenting on that end. And the people who are defending say, well, no, I've known him, I've lived with them, we hung out, he's not a racist. As if there is nothing that's in between that deals with how we've grown up, it deals with our perceptions, it deals with, look, I make this example, and again, it's nothing against athletes, but there's nothing that pisses me off more than going around the country, and I'm rocking my Texas A&M gear, and somebody says, when'd you play ball there? Hell, I didn't play ball. Now, the first question is not, did you graduate or what you major in? I was playing golf one day, the dude said, So how was it playing Jackie Sherrill? I was playing golf with my brother who's also Texas A&M graduate, and I had just written a column 2 weeks earlier for the Footwear Star Telegram. The headline was, "No, I am not a football player." And so he's on that side of the fairway, I'm in the middle of the fairway, my brother's on this side. He asked the question, and I got a 5-iron in my hand, I'm just twirling that sucker, just looking dead at that pin going. And my brother just go, "Oh my God, please don't answer, please don't answer." So I didn't even respond. We finally got to finish that whole lot, go to the tee. He goes, "I don't know why I asked that question." "Yes, you do." So what happens is we have perceptions and we have beliefs, and a lot of them are based on race. If I see a 6'5" white guy, I automatically don't assume he played basketball. I just don't. So what happens is when we talk about race, we have to acknowledge that there's something that's in between not a racist, you're a racist, that plays into this, and then we simply don't like to have that because now it brings into question how our mothers and fathers raised us, how our friends around us. And so I often ask people when we talk about the issue of race, I moderated this thing in Wilmington, Delaware at the King Day, and had all these black and white, Hispanic and Asian students, and they said, "Oh, we get along, it's great." And I was sitting there going, "This is a bunch of BS right here." So I said, "Let me ask y'all a question. Who do you eat lunch with?" And they went, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Who do you eat lunch with?" And when I asked that question, all of a sudden, the butt dancing. But I use this on TV at time. When you kicking somebody behind, they get uncomfortable, they start getting in the chair, start doing this here. I call that butt dancing. They start butt dancing, the whole room. And I said, you can't tell me y'all all get along and you live in this wonderful race-neutral world because who you choose to go to lunch with defines your view. I then turned to the parents and I said, "Okay, who eats at your house for dinner?" Room got real uncomfortable. What happens is school, work, or what I call involuntary situations. You don't control really who gets hired. But who you eat with and go to lunch with is a voluntary situation. And oftentimes we eat with people who we are like as opposed to folks, so a lot of times it's based upon race. When I put that out there, the whole conversation changed because they realized that they had self-segregated, but they thought they were all multiracial and it was all wonderful, and they never dawned on them that they were self-segregating, but they thought because they sat in the same classroom, they were living in this multiracial world. That's in terms of, again, if you take Donald Sterling and these other issues, how do you begin to examine the issue of race in a whole different way?
But let me ask this right quick, because, you know, we have to be careful, and you said there's a schism. It's not so black and white. But if a guy comes up to you and asks, and you have on, if I have on the U T-shirt, and he says, "Man, what year you played ball?" Does that mean he's racist? You see, we have to be careful there too.
No, I don't think he's racist.
Right. But
there's a perception though, because if he saw a dude my size, if he saw a white guy my size, he ain't asking that question. Let's just be honest.
Now you can't say you're not saying anything about him, and you just made an assessment of what he will not ask.
He ain't gonna ask me to play ball, Mike.
You see what I'm saying?
He ain't asking me to play ball.
And honestly, because we see, and that's the strappings that we have to be careful with. I may ask, when I see a 6'5" white guy, I'm going to wonder that he plays basketball. If not, he's wasted some nice height. I wish he could have given it to my nephew. You see what I mean? So those things, and maybe that has something to do with time or the people we've been around or the cultures that we've come up with. But, you know, and sports are huge. Let's think through this. Sports are huge in this country. I mean, the money we spend on sports. So when someone sees you in an A&M, maybe you went to A&M or sees me in a U shirt, and you know, we can't just naturally assume, it must be something. Just because I'm black, I don't mean I played sports. You know, I graduated. All of those things. I'm just saying, in order to really grow and be edified, we got to watch it on both ways. My bishop always tells me, put yourself in the next man's shoes, if you will. That's what I'm saying.
I didn't call him a racist. What I'm saying is there are perceptions, there are stereotypes that we buy into. And when you see it over a period of years, and then when I raise it, somebody goes, "Whoa, right. I didn't realize that I jumped to a conclusion."
No, I concur with you because
what we're dealing with here, though, is the whole idea of the word prejudice. The word prejudice means prejudging. So when you come into a situation and you already know, oh, that's, yeah, you played for Abilene State, right? Hey, no, I'm a doctor. Wow. That's what we're talking about here.
Prejudging and assessing are in the same area, but two different things. So I can prejudge someone. That means I made up my mind who he is. Assessing someone is mean I'm trying to read and figure out who he is. And so in asking a question about, man, what position you play, I may be in the assessing, not already prejudging.
That wasn't a question. You judge. As opposed to saying,
man, who you where you
no,
play?
but here's right. No, right. Here's how I
had
do
on
it.
a Texas A&M jersey or shirt now, so I'm thinking sports. You see what I'm saying?
No, but here's the deal though. It's 500,000 former Aggies out there. All of them didn't play.
Yeah, and he may, and everybody may not wear a jersey either.
Right.
That's saying I've got some sports on me. Maybe they're trying to poke.
Okay, the moderator has to intervene here. Mike, Mayor Nutter, can you sit between these two? Go ahead, Mayor Nutter.
And I think I may be offended. I mean, no one's ever asked me, did I play ball?
See what I'm saying? Exactly. Right.
That's what I'm talking about.
Damn.
I
can actually throw.
I can tell you something worse than that happens to me. People come up to me and ask me if I'm Wilt Chamberlain, and I say, Wilt Chamberlain is dead, man. What is that all about?
Maybe they have dating advice.
So Roland, let me ask you this question. I want to get away from Sterling for just 1 second, because, and Mike, you said it best. Maybe you should make the comment. You talked about how sports gives us an opportunity to have these. Say that what you told me back.
Absolutely. What we were talking about is, you know, the Donald Sterlings, the Michael Sams situation. When they happen in sports, because sports garners so much attention from the world, and it's right there on TV, I can't even believe they pay me what they pay me to talk about.
I'm with you. I get paid to talk. I'm cool with that.
I tell people all the time, man, I was fortunate enough to make millions faking people out with my hips. Now I make millions talking about how to fake people out with my lips. It is incredible. This is an incredible world.
Now you see why I didn't play football.
I love it. See what I'm saying? But having that opportunity, because it's so visible, it's so live, it's so real, we don't get that if it's happening in our Fortune 500 companies. You know, we don't get those opportunities to talk about those things. And what we do is we are edified through those conversations. And let's take the Michael Sam situation for a moment, if we will. Growing up, for me, calling Michael Sam and guys that had a sexual orientation opposite of mine, we didn't even know that. So when we use the word, I don't even want to say it because
F word.
I got a job and they don't firing me for saying it. But whenever they use the F word, it wasn't about sexual orientation. It was about a sign of weakness. So now, as we have these conversations, we start dispelling all the myths and edifying one another and getting better at it. Now, hey, that's why I said I want the first guy that is gay to come in the league. I want him to be a linebacker so he can knock somebody out. It doesn't matter. So we can squash all of the stereotypes to move forward. That's what's great about it all. That's what's great about it, that having conversation is what we need. Now, I hate that we focus on the one, like the Sterlings and all of those guys, but we do need to have these conversations.
I want to build on Michael Irvin's point about sports, and in a more serious way for a moment. I mean, it does play out literally on the biggest stage. People are watching, it's broadcast, there's money, there's all kinds of things going on, but we go back in history. So, a couple names. Jesse Owens. It wasn't just about running. What was going on at that time?
Right.
At war, near war, world issues. At the Olympics. This was literally the United States of America against Germany.
Right.
Now being defined on a track. America's strength. 1968 Olympics. John Carlos decides to stand on the podium with a black glove on his hand, puts his fist up in the 1960s as a sign to the world of what was on his mind. Life changed. I mean, never really anything for John Carlos. Our friend here comes into NBA as Lou Alcindor. Changes his name. You got a right to change your name. Huge controversy in sports. Cassius Clay. Muhammad Ali. And then the whole issue, and this is all certainly during my time in my childhood, I know exactly where I was in March of 1971, listening on the radio. As people were you were either a Joe Frazier fan, and that had one set of perspectives, or you were a Muhammad Ali fan. And that had a different set of perspectives for blacks and whites. And they were both in each of those fighters' camps, trying to define, are you a radical or are you, in a more establishment kind of mode. And so, I mean, that's what's been going on. I mean, not all of that during my time, but certainly from the 60s on up, how race and other issues have played out on a larger scale in the United States of America and around the world, shaping attitudes and perspectives on who we are and what we're about. And a lot of that continues certainly today.
There's a danger, though.
Has that not changed a little bit? And I'm asking a question because, respectfully, maybe you guys are some of you guys a few years older than me here in this sense. Now,
that was nice.
Okay, he was a little younger. Yeah, but that fight was about saying that we were inferior, and it was sports said, see, we're not inferior.
About Frazier Ali?
And Jesse Owens and all of those things. It's about now through sports we show that we're not inferior. Is that still the same fight we're having today?
Yes. But here's what jumped out at me. 36 was positioned as America versus Nazi Germany, but Jesse Owens, when he came back, could not eat in restaurants in his own country. And so, to bring it present day, we will praise our athletes as our warriors on the field, but let's have a conversation about education reform, and are they actually being taught in the very school that's praising them for winning on Friday night? And so all of a sudden, when we begin to force the conversation, sports allows us, because it is a unifying matter, if you will, sports and comedy really are probably, sports, comedy, and music are the three areas where literally we come together regardless of background, depending on the price of the ticket, background, ethnicity, gender, all those different factors, and we're sort of all operating behind this one deal. But you notice all those are three entertainment venues. So I think a lot of times we like to, okay, cool, we can get along, it's great, we can do all this sort of stuff, but then when you go outside of that, now you're back in the real world. The problem that I have when we have these conversations, and as somebody who spent 6 years on CNN, I mean, I have been involved in media since I was 14, went to a journalism high school. What happens is we in media do the exact same thing in the real world. Shh, okay, let's hurry up and end this conversation so we can move on. Let's go move on to what we were talking about beforehand. Let's hurry up and get off this stuff dealing with Michael Sam and dealing with race and dealing with gender so we can get back to playing games. Because we like to play games versus dealing with the hard stuff. And so what I always try to do is say, wait a minute, no, you have to keep that conversation going, because even if you disagree with Michael Sam, disagree with Riley Cooper, disagree with Incognito, disagree with Donald Sterling, or even agree with them, it's like the whole Mark Cuban discussion. Folks were upset. I had no problem with what Mark Cuban had to say because somebody said, hey, I got prejudices. I'm biased. And he puts it on the table, and the argument turned into, I remember watching seeing a clip on CNN, is Cuban a racist? It was the stupidest conversation in the world. It should have been, he puts it on the table, so can we now own up to our own prejudices and our own biases and have that conversation? Because part of the problem with a race discussion in America, if we really want to be honest, there are a lot of whites who really want to talk about their personal feelings, but are afraid to actually say it for being called a racist. And you have to create the environment where people can be honest about how they feel and then begin to say, okay, so when he made his comment about Trayvon Martin, about the hoodie, my first response wasn't, you're racist. My first question would have been, Mark, what has caused you to feel that way? What has brought you to that particular viewpoint? And if the moderator had asked that question, it would have led to why he felt that way, which leads to the next question. What we have evolved into is statement, denunciation, as opposed to statement, question. That has to happen.
So, Kareem, let me ask you this. Yeah. Roland, how much time we have? All right, Roland.
We're going to where to go. My flight leaves at 2:45. I'm just messing with you. Just messing with you.
All right, wait, a quick follow-up, and then I want to ask Kareem a question on it. So, when the Trayvon Martin incident happened, Kobe Bryant made a comment in terms of the way the Miami Heat players addressed it. They came out with the hoodies on in solidarity, and you took a little bit of exception to what Kobe had to say. Just give us your perspective on that really quick.
Well, first, Kobe gave an interview to the New Yorker. I read the piece, and the question that the interviewer asked really was a ridiculous question, because he sort of mixed several things together. He sort of mixed what the Miami Heat did with Kobe getting criticism for not being more involved and active on various issues, and then Kobe responded. The issue that I took with that is, first of all, what people seem to forget is that Trayvon Martin was killed on the night of the NBA All-Star game in Sanford, Florida. The game took place in Orlando. He was going back home to watch the game. It was another 2 months before it blew up because, frankly, national media ignored it. We drove it on social media. I remember tweeting Dwayne Wade, who I know, saying, and I specifically said, I am stunned that players who live in Orlando and in Miami are saying nothing about this, because he lived in Miami Gardens. And so Dwayne, I remember him tweeting, Roland, thanks, brother, for pushing us and keeping us on these issues. A day later, they made the statement. The problem I had with Kobe was he was missing critical facts as to what actually happened and what took place there. The Heat players were not saying George Zimmerman was guilty. They were sending a signal that we stand in solidarity, and what they also were saying with those hoodies, that even though we might be NBA ballers, depending upon where we go, they may not recognize the face of LeBron or Dwayne, so we're just like Trayvon. So that was the issue. That's why I took issue with what he had to say, and I went at Kobe hard. And look, I'll make it perfectly clear. If I'm willing to criticize the president and Oprah, Kobe, I'm going to swing at you too. It don't even matter. Okay? My philosophy is, if you do good, I'll talk about you. If you do bad, I'll talk about you. At the end of the day, I'm going to talk about you. He called my office, and we had a discussion, and he said, you know, the issue that I stated was, I have a problem with people jump to someone's side because of race. And I said, Kobe, let me remind you, because of the history of black men being accused of rape in America, it's some black folks who jumped to your side when you got accused of rape. So in that conversation, and it was interesting, I mean, I was flying somewhere, and he hit me, and I see this number. Luckily, I answered. He said, hey, I hear you talking about me. I went, who the hell is this? He said, it's Kobe. I said, okay. So I stepped to the side. We had about a 20-minute conversation, but it led to a discussion, and what was great about it was, and I told him, I said, Kobe, when you make that statement, the interview, it made it sound as if the Heat players jumped to the conclusion because Trayvon was black, and that's not what they were saying. And I said, that's what I took exception to. But it led to a conversation, and I told him, I said, we can discuss it offline. Or I said, look, you want to discuss it on television, on radio, because there needs to be a broader discussion here, because Jim Brown criticized him for the same thing. That's what I'm saying. When these things happen, we either can respond or we can communicate and literally break it down to have a back and forth. And that's why I think there's so many of us are afraid. That's why media is so important. So we shouldn't have the 8-minute quick discussion, racist or non-racist. It's, okay, what do you mean by that? How do we get to that?
Okay, but can we also here again on the other side, because if I'm walking it with my little girl, and I see somebody walking, and it's 98 degrees out like it often is here in Texas, and you have on a hoodie over your head at 98 degrees, they don't come much blacker than me, but I'm going to be a little worried. I got my little girl with me. I don't know why you hide your face at 90 degrees, so that mean I'm racist, but I'm worried. You know,
you might have an iron
I thought what happened with Mark Cuban the other day. Mark, if I see somebody walking towards me with all tattoos all over his, and he got those little teardrops in his eyes, I just saw on TV, that means you're a murderer. Then that means with your dress, you wanted to scare me. I'm telling you, that worked. I'm going on the other side of the road.
But hold on, right there.
You got these teardrop murder. See, so what we can say, that's what I'm telling you. We all as humans have to assess the things around us. Our own health is involved.
But freeze it right there. You just said, I just saw it on TV.
Yes, if I just, right, exactly. So I'm grabbing an assessment. We're making absolutes out of things.
No.
When we're trying
but I'm glad you said that, because you're proving my point. What happens is we are watching television, we are watching whether it's movies or the news, and all of a sudden, what we are being fed is driving our perceptions of one another, which also goes back to the work that you're involved in terms of your documentaries, your movies, and your books, and what I'm doing as well by saying maybe part of the problem is we have an unbalanced diet of what we have been fed in America that is driving these racial perceptions.
Let me ask
that's part of the issue.
So, Michael, are you good on that or no?
That the problem is not that it was down at the root. I understand that. I believe some of that is reality.
Okay, Kareem, so let me ask you this. So we're wrapping up here. Kareem, I have a two-part question. The first one, in terms of just simply what role has sports played in race relations? Just give us that perspective.
I think sports has the potential to be a great area where people can bridge to one another. And by that I mean, all right, Los Angeles Lakers win the World Championship. They have a street parade downtown in front of City Hall. The whole community was there. On the Spanish language movie theater, Saludos a Lakers, Campeones Mundial. People from the Korean community.
What I tell you,
people
speaking languages, go ahead.
People from Korean community, South Central LA, West Side, the Valley, Orange County. They all came together. It was wonderful. And then you look at the opposite when things don't work like that, when we have the Rodney King incident, and LA was tearing itself apart. There's still charcoal alleys in different parts of LA behind that. So sports can bring us together in terms of the big community. As individuals, you go out there every day, you're working on the baseball field or on the weight room or on football field with people who aren't like you, and you see that they're hardworking, they have a sense of humor, they're this, they're that, and the other. You relate. What do you like? Oh, I like Jay-Z or whatever. It enables people that would not necessarily have the opportunity to get to know each other and understand, hey, they're just like us. We're dealing with the same issues. We're trying to get to the same place. So, you know, the potential for sports to overcome a lot of ignorance and lack of knowledge of other people is huge. White Americans did not ever see a black American as having any value, especially heroic value, until Joe Louis beats up Max Schmeling. They liked that. That was pretty good. And all of a sudden, they looked upon black Americans in a different way. Jackie Robinson breaks the color barrier in baseball. People say, well, hey, no, he can play. He should be out there. If he's not out there, that means that the best baseball players are not playing Major League Baseball. That should change. So sports has that potential, and I think for that reason, it is a good thing, especially as we know it here in America, and the things that it makes possible for all of us in terms of understanding and knowing each other.
So, Kareem, let me ask this final question to you, and I'll move down so everybody will get their final thoughts. When the Donald Sterling incident happened, you wrote the article, Time Magazine. I didn't understand half your big words in there, but it was a good article. the words I did understand was...
Read his dictionary.
So, here's what I want to ask you. The incident became public on a Friday night, Saturday morning. We're in LA on Tuesday morning because we hear that Adam Silver, the commissioner, is about to make a ruling. I call you and your team the night before. We come down to City Hall. You come to City Hall, and we're in Mayor Garcetti's office. You, Norm Nixon, A.C. Green, Steve Nash, Luke Walton, all these great players there. Why was it so important for you to be there at City Hall amongst your players? And what were you thinking right before Adam Silver made his ruling?
I was thinking that the NBA has been my life, and I do not want some racist clown being the face of the NBA. That was the one thing that got to me. And Commissioner Silver did such a great job. My first year in the league, I played in Milwaukee. It was that year that they hired the very first black general manager, Wayne Embry.
Yeah, of course.
And my whole life since then, I've seen the NBA make more and more reaching out to be inclusive and to open up doors in the front office, management, in other areas where black Americans at one point were not considered. So I know that the NBA, its heart is right, and it has tried to do the right thing. And if Donald Sterling is the face of that, something had to be done. So that's why I got on my horse. Yeah.
Round of applause for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. All right, Mayor Nutter, I'm going to give you the flexibility on your question because, you know, you're a mayor, you have a unique perspective you're dealing with. My brother's keepers, you passionately talked about violence in our communities in the church and took everybody to task. We know this race issue is real in our country. What final thought do you want to share to us?
Two things. Roland said something earlier. I won't.
Keep going. Okay.
What I have to say. Roland said something earlier.
Lean in.
I love leaning in with you.
Let me put a stop to that right now.
I ain't scared of a brother.
Roland said something earlier, and I won't get it exactly right, so don't criticize. But he said, he was talking about if a white person wants to talk about race or wants to get into a race conversation, there may be some challenges. And Mayor Johnson certainly knows this. I mean, when we talk about My Brother's Keeper, Cities United, challenges going on in African-American communities for black men and boys as it relates to violence. You know, black men are 6% of the population in the United States of America, 43% of the homicide victims. I mean, that is an astounding circumstance. Question is, I mean, Mitch Landrieu, mayor of New Orleans, talks about this issue.
Yes, indeed.
And he's white. Just in a conversation last night with the new mayor of Boston, Marty Walsh, wants to talk about this issue. And so the question is, especially for the African-American community, are you prepared to have that conversation and have someone who does not look like you talk about these things, not criticizing, not blaming the victim, but it's obviously a little easier for an African-American mayor to talk about black-on-black violence, but, I mean, I get a little bit of static back at home also.
Yep.
it has to be triple worse, doubly difficult for a non-African American leader, mayor, city council member, whatever, to start talking about black-on-black crime, which could be a very serious issue in your community, and have black folks jumping up talking about, why are you talking about that? So we have to create a safe and comfortable space for folks to be able to talk about real issues. Because what I say to the mayors is, look, somebody might criticize you for talking about it. I can assure you that some folks are going to criticize you for not talking about it. Because death is death, and killings are killings, and shootings are shootings. And as mayors, we have an obligation and a responsibility to deal with these very serious issues. So that door has to swing both ways. That field has to be open, and people have to be ready for a serious conversation if we're going to truly do our jobs and live up to the oath that all of us took to be in these offices. So that's one. The second is, from time to time, we read these stories about, there's a team in Washington, football team, they have a particular name, some people are offended. Is this a real issue here in the country? Should that issue be addressed and taken on in light of what's happened with the Clippers and all of this other, kind of stuff going on, and that a growing proportion of the American Indian community is in fact offended by the name of the team in Washington, D.C. that plays football? Is that a real issue? It's a question.
So that's the question I was actually going to ask Michael at this point. No, we work well together. We work well together. So Michael, the question for you is this broader context. You played football, and those rivalries, Cowboys, Redskins, What is your take on Mayor Nutter's question?
Yeah, and we talked about this, and again, having these conversations was so vital. For years, growing up in Fort Lauderdale, watching my dad, who loved the Cowboys, and we watched Cowboys-Redskins game, and I didn't know. I didn't know as a young man. I didn't know that that it was offensive to them, to Native Americans. I didn't know. I didn't know. So in getting that, I was like, wow. This is the importance of having it and having those conversations. I want to have a conversation with somebody to get an understanding of it, because I still do not know. But if it offends somebody, then we should do something about it. If we understand that, that's the great part of it. And here's the best part. Even with the owner, Dan Snyder, I know they love making money. It could make a lot of money for them, because everybody that has all those Redskin things, they got to get the new ones. So you can really satisfy both sides in understanding that, and we all understand. I get caught with people all the time, man, it's the tradition of it, and I appreciate tradition and everything, but moving forward is what's important, and moving forward together is what's important, I believe.
A capitalist.
Well, if that was my last statement, I want to close with this. Let me close with this, because I want to go back to what he said about 68 and everything, and we're talking about 40 years, a little over 40 years, and Roland was absolutely correct. I want us to, and we will take these moments and deal with these tough spots, these tough rubs that we hear from the one, Donald Sterling, and people like that will invite these kinds of conversations. But as we leave here, I want us leaving with the right taste in our mouths. 68, a little bit past 40 years in the Bible, they call that a generation.
Right.
The reality is we have to be realistic when we're expecting change. And just because we start talking about it and mentioning it doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight. There's a reason God allowed the children of Israel to wander for 40 years in the desert to get the old land of slavery out of them before they walked into the new land of promise without the issues of slavery on them. We still have the remnants of the Donald Sterlings, and we'll focus on the one. But I don't want us to miss the bigger point. And those 40 years, we can say it's not a big thing, but it's humongous. I've seen African Americans boo-hoo cry because they didn't think it would be possible in their lifetime of having an African-American president. And that happened in a little over 40 years. And we can focus on this one dude, Donald Sterling, all we want. Or we could be smart enough and focus on what we all accomplished when we came together as one. That's what I think we should do. That's my closing comment.
I will.
We'll let Roland will close us out with the final thought.
I sat, a couple of points. I sat on the set of CNN that night, and then when I was shedding tears, folks asked me why. I said, well, first of all, it wasn't because of his election. I said, I didn't do it because I saw him. I saw literally the U.S. soldiers who were hanging from trees and lynched in their uniforms. That was the immediate image that came to my mind. But the thing that I also said after that, because this also ties into sports, is that I recognize that the inauguration parade is over. And if you have not read Dr. King's Chaos or Community, you should. Because literally what we are talking about today, he wrote in 1967 when we were grappling with riots across the country. What he said was, it's real. He said it did not cost America much, didn't cost America much to allow us to sit at the same lunch counter or to be in the same hotel. He said, now the question is, the real cost is about to be tabulated, and is America prepared to write that check? And he broke that whole thing down in terms of where we are in terms of society. And so when I look at opportunity, when I look at this idea of sports and how race connects, what each and every single one of you should do is do something that Reverend Jackson often talks about. He said, the reason African Americans have been able to achieve a level of success in sports and entertainment, he says, because in sports, if it's basketball, the court is 94 feet for everybody. It's 10 feet high for everybody. Shot clock is the same, fouls are the same, everything is the same. And so when you go to play, your talent will determine whether you succeed or not. It was undeniable that Kareem, working on his game, was going to achieve the level of success, because in the game of sports, you can perform or you can't perform. You have the talent or you don't. Same with Michael. Does not matter. But the real question that you should be challenging people in your city and your corporate citizens and your schools and everyone else is say, why is it that in sports, rules are the same, we can measure success, but then off the court, off the field, it goes from objective to subjective, where all of a sudden your talent does not define whether or not you will become an all-star. What somebody else is thinking defines that. And so when I'm looking at the folks who are CEOs, but not just, oh my goodness, we have several African-American CEOs, but I'm looking at how many black board members there are, how many Hispanic board members there are. I'm looking at who are the folks who are vice presidents, who is in the pipeline, because what we're still seeing in this country, we're still seeing an inequity in terms of folks at the top and the bottom. When you look at right now in America, there's still not an African-American who is a primetime host of a cable news network with a black man in the White House is a problem for me. So what happens is we praise sports because our sports figures worked on their game, achieved success because they said if you run faster, throw longer, if you can shoot better and rebound better, then you're going to succeed. We should have the exact same attitude in the rest of our society. And when that happens and we make it the point we preach all the time, then we'll see a closing of the racial inequality gap. When the average white home has $100,000 in wealth, the average African-American has $5,000. You won't see the issue of subprime loans. You won't see 53% of black wealth wiped out in the last 6 years because of the home foreclosure crisis, and it will take 2 generations to get just that money back. When we have that attitude about life as we do about sports, then we're going to see it. and I would be remiss to say we should have the exact same attitude when it comes to our sports teams, where mayors out there, you're building new arenas for owners and you want them to win championships. And what you should be saying when it comes to the education of our children, whether it's a question of school choice and ed reform, I want to ensure that we have the same kind of success. So if you want to win a championship in football or basketball, you sure as hell better win some championships when it comes to educating our children. Focus on that and that, then we are not going to be talking about inequality in America.
But sports is leading the way, right? Because now we got five owners in the four major sports. We only got 6 CEOs in the Fortune 500 companies. 75 of the top 250 companies don't have any African Americans on their board. Only about 2%, less than 2%.
Google doesn't, Facebook doesn't, eBay doesn't.
I figured it may be here. I wasn't going to name him, but I'll let that go. He did that.
Oh, I name everybody. Don't worry about it.
That. So he's right in that sense. In sports, we have such a major amount of guys on the field. That's why we get a chance to talk about these things and hopefully change all the things we need to change. But these discussions are important.
Before I let him go, and before you applied, I wanted the honor to give, as the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, we wanted to give the President's Award to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and the Skyhook Foundation for all of his outstanding work that he's doing around the country. Let's give a round of applause for all of our panelists and Kareem.
Thank you.
On this 4th of July, Arizona Senator John McCain